One shattered glass altered Clara's entire existence. A scarlet stain, blooming across a billionaire's pristine lapel, was supposed to mean instant termination, or worse. Yet hours later, fishing through the lint in her cheap uniform pocket, she pulled out a flawless 10-carat diamond. The game had just begun. The dining room at Mafia on Central Park South was a symphony of understated wealth. The air smelled of white truffles, butter-poached lobster, and the subtle metallic tang of raw oysters. For Clara Hayes, it smelled like survival. At 24, she was drowning in the undertow of her mother's astronomical oncology bills, working double shifts just to keep the collection agencies from seizing their small apartment in Astoria, Queens. Thursday nights were notoriously demanding, but tonight carried a suffocating tension that had nothing to do with the Michelin-starred menu. Table 42, the secluded corner booth flanked by frosted glass partitions, was occupied by Gabriel Moretti. Gabriel did not technically exist on any NYPD gang database. Officially, he was the CEO of Moretti Holdings, a venture capital firm specializing in lower Manhattan real estate and international shipping logistics. Unofficially, he was the ruthless architect of the largest organized crime syndicate operating on the eastern seaboard. He sat with the quiet, terrifying stillness of a predator waiting for the brush to rustle. He wore a bespoke charcoal Brioni suit that probably cost more than Clara's annual rent, his dark eyes scanning the room with cold calculation. With him were three men who looked equally out of place among the Upper East Side socialites. They picked at their crudo, their eyes darting, shoulders rigid beneath tailored jackets that bulged ever so slightly at the ribs. "Clara," hissed Mr. Beaumont, the maitre d', his face glistening with anxious sweat. He shoved a silver tray into her hands. Resting on the velvet cloth was a freshly decanted bottle of 2015 Domaine de la Romane Conti, a Burgundy that retailed for nearly $6,000. "Do not speak unless spoken to. Pour from the right. If you drop so much as a single bead of condensation on that table, I will personally throw you into the Hudson." Clara swallowed hard, her hands trembling as she gripped the tray. Understood. She navigated the crowded floor, her non-slip shoes squeaking faintly against the polished mahogany floorboards. As she approached table 42, the temperature in the air seemed to drop. Gabriel was in the middle of a low, sharp conversation in rapid Italian. He didn't look up as Clara stepped to his right. She presented the bottle with practiced elegance, her left hand folded neatly behind her back. Gabriel finally nodded, a silent command to pour. Clara tilted the bottle, watching the deep, ruby liquid cascade into the massive crystal bowl of the Rydell glass. It was going perfectly. Then the front doors of the restaurant swung open with a violent crash. A man in a camel hair overcoat, flanked by two massive enforcers, bypassed the host stand, ignoring Mr. Beaumont's frantic protests. It was Victor Romanov, the notoriously volatile head of a rival faction that controlled the Brooklyn docks. He marched straight toward table 42, his face flushed with fury. "Gabriel!" Victor roared, his heavy Russian accent cutting through the delicate acoustic jazz playing over the restaurant speakers. The three men at Gabriel's table shot to their feet, their hands instantly diving inside their jackets. Victor's men mirrored the movement. The entire dining room froze. Forks stopped halfway to mouths. Conversations died in panicked throats. Gabriel didn't stand. He didn't even flinch. He just looked up at Victor with a gaze so icy it could have frozen the East River. "Victor," Gabriel said, his voice a low, lethal baritone. "You are interrupting my dinner." "You hijacked the shipment at Port Newark," Victor snarled, slamming a heavy, ringed fist onto the table. The violent impact shook the heavy oak table. Clara, who was mid-pour, jolted in pure, instinctual terror. The heavy bottle of Romanée Conti slipped from her sweating palms. Time seemed to slow to a torturous crawl. Clara watched the bottle tip forward, striking the edge of Gabriel's Riedel glass. The glass shattered. A violent wave of dark, $6,000 vintage wine erupted outward, splashing directly across Gabriel Moretti's chest, soaking his pristine white silk shirt and ruining the charcoal Brioni suit. A collective gasp echoed through the restaurant. Clara stopped breathing. The world spun. She had just assaulted the most dangerous man in New York City. The silence that followed was absolute. Victor Romanov blinked, momentarily derailed by the sheer absurdity of the waitress who had just dumped wine all over his mortal enemy. Gabriel's bodyguards turned their lethal glares from the Russians directly onto Clara. One of them actually took a step toward her, his jaw clenched. Clara fell to her knees, frantically grabbing linen napkins from the empty chairs, her hands shaking so violently she could barely hold them. "I am so sorry. Oh my God, I am so sorry, sir. Please, I didn't mean—" Gabriel raised a single, scarred hand. The bodyguard stopped dead in his tracks. Victor Romanov remained silent. Gabriel slowly stood up. He towered over Clara, casting a long, terrifying shadow over her crouching form. She squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for a physical blow, waiting to be dragged out the back door by men who made people disappear for a living. Instead, Gabriel leaned down. As he did, he stumbled slightly, an incredibly unnatural movement for a man of his grace, bumping his hip hard against Clara's shoulder. His large hand brushed aggressively against the front pocket of her apron as he steadied himself. "Stand up," he commanded. Clara scrambled to her feet, clutching the useless, wine-soaked napkins to her chest. Gabriel looked at Victor, completely ignoring the massive red stain bleeding across his chest. "As you can see, Victor, my evening has been ruined. If you want to discuss Newark, you will do it through my attorneys. If you ever approach me in public again, I will have you buried under the very docks you think you control. Leave." Victor sneered, but the sheer cold authority in Gabriel's voice broke his nerve. With a flick of his chin, Victor and his men turned and stormed out of the restaurant. Gabriel turned his dark, impenetrable eyes back to Clara. She shrank under his gaze, tears of absolute panic pricking the corners of her eyes. "What is your name?" he asked quietly. "Clara," she whispered, her voice cracking. "Clara Hayes. Sir, I will pay for the dry cleaning. I'll pay for the suit. Please don't." Gabriel stared at her for 3 agonizing seconds. Then he reached into his trousers, pulled out a thick money clip, and tossed a stack of crisp $100 bills onto the wine-soaked table. "Keep the change, Clara Hayes," he said. Without another word, he turned and walked out, his men falling strictly into formation behind him. Clara stood trembling in the middle of the dining room, the smell of spilled burgundy heavy in her lungs, completely unaware that her nightmare hadn't just ended. It was only just beginning. "You are the luckiest girl in Manhattan, Hayes." Clara sat in Mr. Beaumont's cramped basement office, staring blankly at the wall calendar. She had spent the last hour hyperventilating in the employee restroom, fully expecting to be fired, blacklisted from the hospitality industry, and possibly hunted down by the mob. "I'm not fired," Clara croaked. Mr. Beaumont wiped his forehead with a handkerchief. He looked just as shaken as she did. "10 minutes ago, I received a phone call from one of Mr. Moretti's associates. They made it abundantly clear that if you were terminated for tonight's accident, Maria would face severe consequences with the health inspector, the fire marshal, and the liquor authority by tomorrow morning." Clara's brow furrowed. "Why would he protect my job?" "I don't know, and frankly, I don't care to know. You finish your shift, you go home, and you pray he never comes back. Get out of my office." By 1:00 a.m., the restaurant had finally closed. Clara felt like a hollow shell as she dragged her feet into the women's locker room. The adrenaline had completely worn off, leaving her utterly exhausted. She untied the straps of her heavy canvas apron, wincing at the lingering smell of the spilled Romanée Conti. As she folded the apron to shove it into her duffel bag, something heavy swung inside the deep front pocket, smacking against the metal door of her locker. Clara froze. She hadn't kept her order pad in there. She had dropped it on the floor during the commotion. Frowning, she reached her hand deep into the dark pocket. Her fingers brushed against something cold, hard, and metallic. Slowly, she pulled it out into the harsh fluorescent light of the locker room. All the breath left her lungs. Resting in the center of her calloused palm was a ring. It wasn't just a ring. It was a weapon of pure, concentrated wealth. A massive, flawless emerald-cut diamond, easily 10 carats, was set in heavy platinum. The facets caught the cheap overhead lights, throwing blinding prisms of white fire across the dingy locker room walls. Clara's hands began to shake again, worse than before. She tilted the heavy band. Engraved on the inside were the letters H.W., Harry Winston, followed by a serial number and a Russian inscription. Her mind raced, flashing back to the agonizing moment of the spill. Gabriel leaned down. As he did, he stumbled slightly, bumping his hip hard against Clara's shoulder. His large hand brushed aggressively against the front pocket of her apron. It hadn't been a stumble. Men like Gabriel Moretti didn't lose their footing. He had intentionally bumped into her. In the chaos of the shattered glass, the screaming Russians, and her own panic, he had used the moment to drop a multi-million-dollar piece of stolen jewelry into the pocket of an invisible waitress. But why? Suddenly, Viktor Romanov's furious accusation echoed in her mind. "You hijacked the shipment at Port Newark." Clara wasn't stupid. She watched the news. 3 days ago, a highly publicized armored car heist at the Newark shipping ports had resulted in the theft of an unnamed Russian oligarch's private collection. The authorities had been turning the city upside down looking for it. Gabriel hadn't come to Maria just to eat. He had come to meet Victor. And when Victor barged in, Gabriel must have realized he was walking into a trap. Perhaps the police were waiting outside, or perhaps Victor's men were going to shake him down right there in the restaurant. Gabriel needed to ditch the stolen evidence immediately onto someone no one would ever suspect. Clara stuffed the ring deep into the bottom of her duffel bag, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She practically sprinted out of the restaurant, keeping her head down, terrified that every passing shadow was a mobster waiting to slit her throat. She made it to her Astoria apartment just before 2:30 a.m. The familiar creak of her front door usually brought her peace, but tonight, the cramped, worn-down living room felt like a cage. She locked the deadbolt, fastened the chain, and pushed a heavy wooden chair under the doorknob. She dumped her bag onto her small kitchen table. The diamond rolled out, mocking her with its brilliance against the peeling laminate. She couldn't go to the police. If she handed over a stolen Russian Mafia diamond, Gabriel Moretti would know exactly who tipped them off. She'd be dead before the trial even began. If she tried to sell it, she'd be flagged by every jeweler in the state and arrested for grand larceny. She was completely trapped, a pawn in a game of chess played by monsters. Clara didn't sleep. She sat by the window in the dark, watching the streetlights flicker over the quiet Queen's pavement. When the sun finally began to rise, painting the city in pale shades of grey and gold, Clara saw, parked directly across the street from her apartment building, idling quietly next to a broken fire hydrant, was a jet-black Cadillac Escalade with heavily tinted windows. Clara's blood ran cold. She backed away from the window, pressing herself flat against the wall. Her cell phone, resting on the kitchen counter, suddenly vibrated. The jarring buzz made her jump out of her skin. She crept over to the counter and looked at the screen. Unknown number. Her hand hovered over the phone for a long time. Finally, with a trembling finger, she hit accept and brought the speaker to her ear. "Look out the window, Clara," a smooth, deeply terrifying voice said. It was Gabriel. "What do you want from me?" she whispered, fighting the urge to sob. "I left something in your care last night," Gabriel said, his tone conversational, as if they were discussing the weather. "You kept it safe for me. I appreciate that." "I don't want it. Come take it." "Please, I won't say anything. I swear to God, I cannot come take it," Gabriel interrupted, his voice hardening just a fraction. "Victor's men are watching me. The federal authorities are watching me. The only person in New York City who is currently off the board is you." "I can't be part of this," Clara pleaded. "I have a sick mother. I just pour wine, Mr. Moretti. Please." A long silence stretched over the line. "My driver, Damien, is downstairs in the Escalade. He has an envelope for you. Come down, take the envelope, and get in the car." "And if I don't?" she asked, her voice cracking. "Victor Romanov is currently trying to figure out where the ring went," Gabriel said softly. "He has eyes inside Maria. How long do you think it will take before he realizes the clumsy waitress was a very convenient distraction? If Victor gets to you before I do, he won't just kill you, Clara. He will kill everyone you love to make a point." Clara squeezed her eyes shut, a single tear escaping and tracking down her cheek. "Put on a nice dress, Clara," Gabriel commanded. "Damien is waiting." The line clicked dead. Clara stood in her dark kitchen, the 10-carat diamond glittering malevolently on the table, realizing that her old life had ended the second that wine hit Gabriel Moretti's chest. The envelope Damien handed her through the lowered window of the Escalade was thick, sealed with a wax stamp of a griffin. Clara sat in the plush leather back seat, her cheap black dress completely out of place against the immaculate interior. Her hands trembled as she broke the seal. Inside were 2 items. The first was a glossy single-page document bearing the letterhead of Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. Clara's breath caught in her throat. It was her mother's account statement. The devastating 6-figure balance that had been haunting her every waking moment now read exactly 0. A wire transfer had cleared at 6:20 a.m. The second item was a velvet choker necklace, heavily encrusted with diamonds. "Put it on, Miss Hayes," Damien said from the driver's seat, his eyes watching her through the rearview mirror. "What is happening?" Clara whispered, clutching the hospital statement. "Why did he do this?" Mr. Moretti rewards loyalty, and he protects his investments. You are currently both. The Chasseurs Escalade glided through the morning traffic, crossing the Queensboro Bridge and descending into the concrete canyons of Manhattan. They arrived at 56 Leonard Street, the famous jagged glass skyscraper in Tribeca, known to locals as the Jenga Building. Damien escorted her through a private subterranean garage, up an express elevator that opened directly into a sprawling, sunlit penthouse. Gabriel Moretti stood by floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Hudson River. He had traded the ruined Brioni suit for a tailored navy turtleneck and dark trousers, looking less like a ruthless syndicate boss and more like a tech billionaire. But the dangerous aura surrounding him was impossible to ignore. "The hospital bill," Clara started, her voice shaking as she stepped onto the Brazilian walnut floors. "I don't know how I can ever repay that." "You already hold the payment in your pocket," Gabriel said, turning to face her. "The ring." She reached into her small purse and pulled out the heavy platinum band. She placed it carefully on the glass coffee table between them, pulling her hand back as if the diamond were radioactive. "Victor Romanov is a brute," Gabriel said, pouring 2 glasses of sparkling water at a nearby wet bar. "But he is not the true head of the Bratva. That ring, the Romanov star, belonged to his late father. In their culture, the man who possesses the star commands the absolute loyalty of the old guard captains. Victor stole it from his own uncle in Newark to legitimize his hostile takeover." Clara swallowed hard. "So you stole it back?" "I recovered it," Gabriel corrected smoothly, handing her a glass. "To destabilize Victor's fan and prevent a street war that would hurt my legitimate businesses. But Victor is desperate. He has locked down the city. He is searching for a thief, Clara. He is tearing apart pawn shops, interrogating fences, and torturing my associates." "Then give it to the old guard," Clara pleaded. "Give it to his uncle. Just get it away from me." "I will. But the handover takes time to arrange securely. Until then, the ring needs to remain perfectly hidden in plain sight, on a finger." Gabriel took a slow sip of his water, his dark eyes locking onto hers. "Congratulations, Clara. We are engaged." The glass slipped from Clara's fingers, shattering against the hardwood floor, her second broken glass in 12 hours. "Excuse me," she gasped. "Victor is looking for a heist crew. He is not looking for a billionaire's fiancée wearing a newly purchased 10-carat Harry Winston engagement ring," Gabriel explained with terrifying calm. "If I protect you simply as a waitress, Victor will know you hold something of value. But if I claim you as my future wife, my protection is a matter of honor. To touch you would be an act of war against the Moretti family. It is the only narrative that keeps you alive." "I can't pretend to be engaged to a Mafia boss," Clara shouted, panic bubbling over. "I don't know how to act. I don't belong in this world. And my mother—" "Your mother is receiving the finest private care in the state," Gabriel interrupted softly, stepping closer. The sheer magnetism of his presence silenced her. He reached down, picking up the massive diamond ring from the table. He took her left hand. His touch was remarkably warm, his thumb brushing over her calloused knuckles. "You belong wherever I say you belong," Gabriel murmured, slipping the cold platinum band onto her ring finger. It was a perfect fit. "For the next 3 weeks, you will live in this penthouse. You will attend galas on my arm. You will smile for the paparazzi. And when the old guard removes Victor, our brief, tragic romance will end in a quiet, broken engagement. You will keep the penthouse, and your mother will never see another medical bill." Clara looked down at the blinding diamond on her hand, then up into Gabriel's intense, unyielding gaze. She was dancing on a razor's edge between salvation and a shallow grave. 3 weeks, she whispered. Not a day more, he promised. 2 weeks later, Clara Hayes was no longer the invisible girl pouring wine at Maria. She was the ghost of Fifth Avenue, a sudden mysterious fixture in Manhattan's elite circles. Wrapped in couture Valentino and heavily guarded by Damien and his men, she played the part of Gabriel Moretti's fiercely guarded obsession. And the terrifying truth was, she was no longer sure she was playing a part. In the quiet hours inside the Tribeca penthouse, the cold mob boss melted into a complex, fiercely protective man. Gabriel taught her how to read the city's power dynamics, how to hold her ground in rooms full of predators, and dangerously, how it felt to be truly seen. When he touched the small of her back at charity dinners, the electric jolt was not an act. But the fairy tale shattered on a rainy Tuesday night at the Pierre Hotel. It was a highly publicized charity gala for pediatric oncology, a cause Gabriel had specifically chosen for her. Clara stood near the velvet-draped balcony, the Romanov star heavy on her finger, wearing a blood-red silk gown that pooled at her feet. Gabriel had been pulled aside by a senator, leaving her alone for exactly 2 minutes. That was all Viktor Romanov needed. A heavy hand clamped over Clara's mouth from behind, pulling her ruthlessly into the shadowy alcove of the balcony. The scent of stale vodka and expensive cologne flooded her senses. "Quiet, little bird," Victor hissed in her ear, pressing the cold steel of a suppressed pistol against her ribs. Clara's heart hammered against her rib cage, but the panic she had felt that night at the restaurant was gone. Gabriel had trained her for this. Never show them fear, Clara. Predators only chase what runs. Victor spun her around, his eyes wild and bloodshot. A waitress to a queen in 2 days? Gabriel thinks I am an idiot. He used you to smuggle the ring. Victor's gaze dropped to her left hand. A greedy, triumphant smile split his face. And he is arrogant enough to let you wear it. "Victor!" a voice echoed from the balcony doors. Gabriel stood in the threshold. He wasn't armed, at least not visibly, but the raw, lethal fury radiating from him made the suppressed pistol in Victor's hand seem like a child's toy. "Coy, step away from my fiancée," Gabriel said, his voice dropping to a terrifying guttural pitch. Victor laughed, pressing the barrel harder into Clara's silk gown. "Or what? You'll ruin another suit? The game is over, Moretti. I take the ring, I take the girl, and the bratva remains mine." "Take the ring, then," Clara said evenly. Victor blinked, confused by her utter lack of hysterics. Clara slowly raised her left hand. She met Gabriel's eyes, a silent, powerful communication passing between them. Then, with her right hand, she slid the massive 10-carat diamond off her finger and held it out to the Russian boss. Victor snatched it eagerly, holding the massive emerald-cut stone up to the dim balcony light. "Fools. You are both fools." "Look closer, Victor," Gabriel said, leaning against the doorframe, a dark smirk playing on his lips. Victor frowned. He squinted at the ring. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a small tactical flashlight, and shined it directly onto the gem. The light didn't refract in the blinding, fiery prisms of a flawless diamond. It passed through dully, exposing tiny, microscopic bubbles inside the stone. "Cubic zirconia," Clara said, her voice dripping with ice. "A very good fake. Cost me about $200 in the diamond district." Victor's face drained of color. "Where is it?" he roared, raising the gun at Gabriel. "Where is the star?" "Currently," Gabriel checked his Patek Philippe watch. "It is sitting on the finger of your uncle, Nikolai, in a private room at a Russian bathhouse in Brighton Beach. The old guard captains just swore fealty to him 10 minutes ago. Your men have already stood down. You have no army, Victor. You have no empire. You just have a fake ring and a trespassing charge." As if on cue, the balcony doors behind Gabriel swung open. 6 heavily armed federal agents spilled into the alcove, their tactical rifles raised and locked onto Victor. The Russian syndicate boss dropped the fake ring, his hands trembling as he was slammed against the marble balustrade and handcuffed. Gabriel didn't watch his rival get dragged away. He walked straight to Clara, pulling her into his chest. His heart was beating just as fast as hers. "You took a massive risk, letting him corner you," Gabriel whispered, his hands fiercely gripping her waist. "Damien was supposed to intercept him in the lobby." "I knew you were right behind me," Clara breathed, looking up into his dark eyes. The rain beat against the glass of the balcony doors, isolating them from the chaos of the gala inside. Gabriel reached into his tuxedo jacket. He pulled out a small black velvet box and popped it open. In it rested a flawless, radiant-cut diamond that caught the dim light like captured lightning. It wasn't the Romanov star. It was new. It was hers. "The 3 weeks are over," Gabriel murmured, his voice thick with an emotion the underworld boss rarely allowed himself to feel. "The contract is fulfilled. You are free to walk away, Clara Hayes." Clara looked at the ring, then up at the man who had turned her terrifying nightmare into an empire she suddenly couldn't bear to leave. She reached out, her fingers brushing against the lapel of his immaculate suit. "What if I don't want to walk away?" she asked. Gabriel's lips curved into a devastating smile as he slid the real diamond onto her finger. "Then, my love, the real game begins." Thank you so much for listening to this thrilling Mafia romance drama. If Clara and Gabriel's dangerous love story kept you on the edge of your seat, please hit that like button right now. Don't forget to share this video with your friends who love a good billionaire romance twist, and make sure to subscribe to the channel and ring the bell so you never miss out on our next heart-pounding story. See you in the next one.